So hello, our doors are open, and I know there are a number of you out there. I'm looking around to see if I recognize some names, and I do. And we're going to wait just a few more minutes, give people a little bit more time to get on board. But we are very delighted to have you here with us tonight, each and every one of you. It's great to be able to have a little get together on Zoom. Before we get started, oh, by the way, I'm Carol Frank, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the program this evening, which is about great architects of Great Neck. And tonight we're featuring Delano and Aldrich. Before I introduce our speaker, I would just like to give a shout out to our secretary, Rachel Doppett, who she moved out of state, but she is very, very happy and everything's gone very well. And we are so fortunate that she is still helping us out in so many different ways with our social media, getting these messages out, setting up Zoom. She is has been one of the lucky gifts that we have had. So I want to say thank you so much to Rachel. And I see more people getting on. So tonight, I know many of you are aware that Andrew Cronson, who is a member of our board, and we are so fortunate to have met Andrew and invited him to join the board. And he has been very, very active and has given so much to our organization. As you know, he's very passionate about history and architecture and has tremendous expertise about the architecture of Long Island. So he is currently a Columbia University graduate student, very busy there. And he's been engaging in in-depth novel research about the country's most prominent architects, designers, and decorators, and their connections to Great Neck. His work has taken him to locations rarely visited, giving him access to photograph places that have never been captured before. The past presentations that he's made about great architects have included the careers of Ralph Walker and Emery Roth. If you missed those programs, they are available on our website along with other programs that we have been able to record. So with that, I'd like to say welcome again, and here's Andrew.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight for the third installment of the Great Architects of Great Neck series on Delano and Aldrich, one of America's most celebrated and respected practitioners. We will discuss their background, career, a selection of their works, and their connections to Great Neck. With such a complex and varied body of work, what you'll see is only the smallest sampling of this firm's everlasting significance. As one of America's leading architects of the 20th century, the firm of Delano and Aldrich was founded by William Adams Delano and Chester Holmes Aldrich, who shared a practice from 1903 to 1940. William Adams Delano grew up in New York to a wealthy family and attended Yale University, where he was a member of the secret society of the Scrolling Key. After graduation, he then attended the burgeoning architecture division within the School of Mines at Columbia University and went abroad to study at the famed École des Beaux-Arts in Paris.
Closed caption.
Where he was their first foreign student. Delano's partner, Chester Holmes Aldrich, grew up in Rhode Island and attended Columbia University. After graduating, he too went to study at the École des Beaux-Arts. The two architects met working for the firm of Carrere and Hastings, which was best known for the design of the New York Public Library on 42nd Street. In September of 1903, the two formed a partnership. With both men coming from a background of vacations, summer retreats, and Ivy League lifestyles, it was a fitting match. Throughout their careers, a rich deference to classicism, and specifically traditional American architecture, was a constant no matter what the context or place. As perhaps the guiding North Star, Delano looked to his former home at 12 Washington Square North in Greenwich Village, which you see here, one of the great compositions of a unified row houses in the country. The essence of this house, simple rooms with tall windows, well-proportioned exteriors, and a piano nobile, was a repeating theme throughout their works. The firm had their home base at 126 East 38th Street in Murray Hill.
Can you speak up a little? We can't hear you.
I also need closed caption.
The first floor held reception rooms and their library with offices on the second. The top floor held a large drafting room lit with 3 large north-facing skylights. Although no interior photos survive of their studio, this photo from a peer firm illustrates a drafting room very well. The partners would meet with potential clients to ascertain their vision, but tried to establish politely that they were the authority in aesthetics. That architect-client relationship sometimes came under tension. Delano was known to be stubborn in gentle tones. It was a delicate balance. Clients would also be offered an introductory handbook titled "For You to Decide," which laid the groundwork for working with their firm. It also had an amusing advice section with such tidbits as encouraging installing a burglar alarm system for those who did not prefer having a burglar, and discouraging a garbage incinerator in kitchens that had pet pigs. What possibly signified Delano and Aldrich more than anything else was their upbringing. Both came from privileged backgrounds, attended Ivy League schools, belonged to elite social clubs, and summered in exclusive locales. They both belonged to the Century Association, Coffee Club, Digressionists, Knickerbocker Club, India House, and Brook Club. They could mingle among the affluent and court potential clients. In the case of the Knickerbocker, India, and Brook clubs, they even went on to design their clubhouses. Involvement with the Kips Bay Boys Club and Red Cross of New York would also lead to partnerships. Their complex network was a helix of interlocking circles, bound by a series of personal and institutional ties, all propelled forward by nothing less than extensive amounts of money. In envisioning a design, each project was undergirded by having a functional and legible plan that was always well proportioned. The design elements were shaped by a vast ingrained library in the partners' minds of historical examples to draw inspiration from and then be abstracted. Although these were merely drawings on a piece of paper in their most basic form, it was always a highly personal thing for both the architect and client. Some of their projects could be identified to specific locations, but most were made to the expressive of the current day, and as the partners put it, in the seal of their own hand. The firm preferred to illustrate their work in detailed drawings, often as many as 800 for a single design, and in fine renderings made by their skilled draftsmen. In the case of master plans, they sometimes executed scale models. One of the larger, broader influences that Delano and Aldrich followed was their education in France, which reinforced Beaux-Arts principles of scale, harmony, and proportion. It was believed that each part of the design had to complement the whole. This was especially evident in the landscaping that complemented their work. The firm collaborated with leading practitioners like Marion Cooper Coffin, Ellen Biddle Shipman, Louise Payson, and the Olmsted brothers to create intimate compositions out of hardscape and plant life. While the full breadth of design was not always realized, the end result was always made to be splendid. When the constants throughout their practice and one that was quite unique among their peer architects, was a penchant for incorporating whimsical motifs throughout their work. Such common themes included oceans, sailing, animals, and industry. When working with clients to realize their visions, their interests would be distilled into a decorative program in a very personal way. The partners saw artistic collaboration as the highest goal of decoration, and as such, worked frequently with specialty fabricators, ironworkers, and sculptors. Other trademark details of the firm included grandiose, freestanding spiral staircases and open court loggias that would frame views of terraces or gardens. Although more will be shown later, one of the firm's frequent penchants was to decorate interiors with large-scale murals as a background. This sun parlor on Long Island estate had a site-specific piece executed by Victor White. Other collaborators included Arthur Crisp, James Monroe Hewitt, and Jose Maria Sert, who also did murals for them. In terms of the metalwork that they included for their designs, they frequently had pieces made custom by Cox, Nustran, and Gunnison, and Samuel Yellen, who is perhaps known as the best blacksmith in American history. The firm had a tremendous start with their first major commission for the Walters Art Gallery in Maryland, just a year after being established. They designed this for Henry Walters, a railroad magnate and consummate collector of artwork that housed the family's expansive collection. The firm took their inspiration from the Hotel des Portales in Paris for the exterior. They also took their inspiration for the Collegio dei Gesuiti in Genoa for the interior. They looked at inspiration from a number of different buildings and directly, indirectly quoted others for their designs. They looked at the marble columns, loggias, and vaulted ceilings of the Palazzo Balbi in Genoa, but perhaps more interesting than the art are the ceilings in the art museum, which propel visitors' eyes perpetually upwards, perhaps looking towards the heavens. One of the superlative building types that Delano and Aldrich excelled in was the design of beyond-the-top country homes. Perhaps as a sort of trial by fire, the firm was tasked just shortly after being established with designing a remarkable home for none other than John D. Rockefeller, named Kaikut, which was Dutch for lookout. Throwing a little shade to their socialite peers like the Vanderbilts, they did not want a showpiece. The Rockefeller family wanted a New England feel like the homes they grew up in. Much to the behest of Delano and Aldrich, Ogden Codman, a famed society decorator, was tapped to handle the interiors after intense disagreements over the scheme. When shopping the country, Rockefeller and Codman haggled extensively to get lower prices and even demanded the ability to return if the decoration was not approved. When at home, Rockefeller was notorious for entertaining simply and shunning the press with an intense fervor. Instead of being seen as the lord of the manor, Rockefeller could come to the Hudson Valley to safely get away from his wealth, as one article of the period put it. As the family's prominence grew, Rockefeller called in William Wells Bosworth to design an additional third and partial fourth story, which altered the look tremendously to its current appearance. Although this apparently annoyed their decorator, Ogden Codman, who wrote in a cover note that luckily they could not possibly hurt the existing looks of the house, for it is so ugly as it is. What a pity they didn't use a real architect to begin with. Ouch. Perhaps as important as the residential portion, expansive gardens were laid out by Bosworth and the Olmsted brothers, who are best known for designing Central Park. Today, Kaikut and its expansive grounds are maintained as a museum under the auspices of the National Trust for Historic Preservation and operated by the Historic Hudson Valley Trust. The public is able to learn about the Rockefeller legacy and see this remarkable scheme that these young architects were able to envision. Delano and Aldrich also excelled at interpreting and adapting the architecture of colonial America and the early Republic. They specialized in designing socially exclusive New York City clubs from the Anglo-American past had rich associations. Designed in 1913, the Knickerbocker Club at 2 East 62nd Street in Manhattan catered to members like the Cushing, Golett, Jay, and Livingston families, who would have resonated with the traditional connotations as longtime patrician families of New York. The architects drew their inspiration for the club from 18th century American English and French architecture. The inspiration can be closely gleaned from the Pink Tree House in Salem, Massachusetts. On the interior, a sophisticated program of meeting rooms and event spaces catered to the aristocratic male audience that composed the club. A sweeping staircase to fine circulation across each level. The club remains a fixture of Fifth Avenue overlooking Central Park. It should be noted that while the firm primarily did clubs that only allowed men, they also designed the Colony Club in 1916 on Park Avenue, which is a female-only social club for progressive women of New York. As a private club, the interior photography at the Knickerbocker Club is discouraged, but a photographer named John Wallen was given permission in 2003 for a monograph, which gives us a rare glimpse inside. In addition to their work in the Hudson Valley in New York City, Delano and Aldrich also designed over a dozen estate homes on Long Island. One of their most notable was Oheka, a portmanteau of Otto Herman Kahn, an estate in Huntington, which was designed in 1914 for Kahn, an investment banker who is known as the King of New York. Standing at the top of an artificial hill, Kahn's 108, or depending on who you ask, 127-room mansion was constructed to be completely fireproof. Expansive grounds were designed by Olmsted, with a private golf course by Seth Raynor. The design looked to the Chateau of Lorraine Valley, with an inspiration there, but with a minimum of ornamentation, as having a vast expanse of ornamentation would be far too overwhelming in a mansion this size. Among the many rooms inside was a grand horseshoe-shaped staircase and a large indoor swimming pool. Following Kahn's tenure, the estate was sold in 1938 to the New York City Department of Sanitation for use as a workers' retreat. Instead of Oheka, it became renamed cleverly as Sanita during their time. Following a 20-year stint as the Eastern Military Academy, and then decades of abandonment and arson, the estate was restored in 1990s by Gary Melius. Today, Oheka Castle is a picturesque wedding venue and filming location, recently hosting productions like Succession, Royal Pains, and yes, even Taylor Swift's music video for Blank Space, for those of you who are Swifties. While the inside was one point stripped bare of its fixtures, it has been remade and rebuilt in exacting detail and shines once again. Moving to Old Westbury, Delano and Aldrich designed an art studio in 1913 for Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, a pioneering sculptor and founder of the Whitney Museum of Art. It was built as a refuge for her to get away from her polo playing friends that associated with her husband, who was a prominent polo player. Remarkably, the studio has remained in the family and has been converted into a residence. Although 2 wings were added on in the 1990s by Charles Meyer, few changes had otherwise been made. The entrance was patterned after the famed Villa Medici in Rome, and above the entry is a fresco and intricate mosaic floor by Paul Chalfin. The interior of the studio, which again was a working studio, remains today as a light-filled place with even much of the original furnishings and some of the maquettes that Whitney made. Perhaps the most remarkable part of the studio was the site-specific murals designed by artists like Howard Cushing and Robert Chandler for the interior. As the property is on the market for the first time ever currently, its new owner will have access to world-class art right on their very walls. In New Haven, Connecticut, outside of Yale, is the E.R. Hooker residence, which was designed in 1914 for Elizabeth Russell Hooker, a wealthy progressive activist and suffragette. The significant mansion was built without the intention of having children. In fact, Hooker actually lived with a female partner named Miss Porter, who was her lifelong companion. To accompany this grand home, it is believed that Marion Kruger Coffin, one of America's leading female landscape architects, designed or consulted on the landscaping. While the exterior design can be characterized as English arts and crafts, Talbot Hamlin, one of the leading architects of the 20th century, leading architecture critics of the 20th century, regarded the design as non-stylistic. We can see a deep influence from Edward Lutyens, who is one of Britain's greatest architects. It is worth knowing that this non-style, as they call it, was a common look that Delano and Aldrich employed for their residential works. In 2005, the property was sold for the first time out of the family to Martha and James Alexander, who came to New Haven following a Yale College reunion. As a family with an artistic background, they were drawn to historic architecture. The family undertook a multi-year restoration to update the mechanical systems and refresh the looks. As just their third owner of this property, they were fortunate to receive a structure with few exterior changes, and they worked to reuse materials and make sympathetic updates. The restoration won numerous awards, both regionally and nationally. The result is a functional, elegant design that has become a showpiece gem, the cosmopolitan neighborhood of East Roth. The interiors are likewise timeless that Aldrich designed and remain adaptable to changes in the future. As part of the restoration, the gardens were reconstructed to reflect their earlier character of both informal and formal plantings. As a fortunate and fortuitous result of the garden not having been maintained over the years, it was found that there was extraordinarily rich soil and a rich abundance of wildlife that remains today to create a verdant and beautiful landscape. Just shortly after its founding, the New Haven Preservation Trust recognized this New Haven property, and it was later listed by the family on the National Register of Historic Places in 2010. The garden as well has been recorded in the collections of the Smithsonian Institution for perpetuity. Moving back to New York, the Chelsea Estate in Muttontown on Long Island was designed in 1924 for Benjamin Moore, not the paint magnate, but Moore, who was a developer and relative of Clement Clark Moore, who wrote famed poetry, and his family held massive holdings in the Chelsea section of Manhattan. The design they chose reflects the couple's travel around the world just prior to building their estate. While the front exterior reflects 17th and 18th century French styles, the rear of the estate takes elements from throughout Asia. This design exemplifies the firm's talent at bringing a global perspective to their work in a respectful and modest way. Also common for Delano and Aldrich, the interior featured antique architectural elements dating back centuries, which was commonly imported through Europe. One of the rooms as well had a mural by Jose Maria Sert. Although access has been limited in recent years, the Chelsea Estate is now part of the Muttontown Preserve under the Nassau County ownership. One of Delano and Aldrich's specialties was the creation of massive playhouses or recreational spaces for country homes, which would often be used for tennis or other pursuits. This playhouse in Bayville, Long Island, no longer exists, but it shows the aptitude that they were able to challenge even engineering norms. In 1928, Delano and Aldrich designed a large estate as a wedding present for Charles Shipman Payson, who married into the famed Whitney family. It was built in part of John Hay Whitney's Greentree estate in Manhasset. The design that Ed Delano and Aldrich conceived incorporated a rare exterior of fieldstone that was both stately and casual. As a nod to the Payson family's love of seafaring and hunting, those symbols were incorporated throughout. You can see in the metalwork above the entry a fox, which was the family's symbol. Inside, the star of the show was a multi-story spiral staircase that goes from the basement to the top floor. In addition, the firm collaborated with artist Charles Baskerville to create a stately powder room for Mrs. Payson, which is still intact today. The estate is now part of the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock, where it is used as meeting rooms and office space for the group. In fact, I had my SATs there, AP exams when I was in high school. Union Club of New York was the last major private project the firm did in Manhattan. Designed in 1927, it was created for the oldest men's club in New York, which designed an exuberant but conservative clubhouse. Armed with what was a very large budget, Delano and Aldrich designed everything from the lights to the air vents with a signature wit. The clubhouse featured 5 dining rooms, 100,000 unit cigar humidor, and even an early television set included in every guest room, which was really rare for the 20s. While this is now a private club and they are under no obligation to retain anything beyond the outside, they have been very careful to maintain that sense of character. The interior of the Union Club is no less splendid than the members that inhabited it. Delano wove modern refinements into the architecture, like air conditioning registers and ornamental ceiling rosettes, and in consoles shaped like ships, backgammon boards, and even peacocks. Located at Place de la Concorde, the U.S. Embassy in Paris was designed in 1929 upon the selection of Andrew Mellon, who was then Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. The firm based the design off of the Hotel de Talleyrand, while also matching the design to surrounding buildings in what was seen as a highly regulated site. To accompany the design, Delano and Aldrich had 2 splendid eagles sculpted for the entrance gate by C. Paul Janowin, who was a noted artist who specialized in large-scale sculptural artwork. The interior spaces hope to impart elements of American pride while also being appropriate to engage diplomats and world leaders. As part of the New Deal Depression Relief projects, the firm was invited in 1932 to design a post office on Long Island in Glen Cove for the office of the supervising architect of the Department of Treasury, which was responsible for the erection of many civic buildings throughout the country. The design that the firm thought of can be traced back to an earlier work by Charles Bulfinch for the Lancaster Meeting House. The firm of Delano and Aldrich would actually later be called back roughly 30 years later to design the initial scheme for the Glen Cove Public Library. Keeping true to form, the post office was given an allocation to site-specific artwork in order to employ artists who were unemployed during the Depression. Glen Cove's post office features a bas-relief of the Great Seal of the United States, which was executed by sculptor Hazel Clare. The interior and exterior remain just as handsome today. One of the last major works of Delano and Aldrich was the 1939 Marine Air Terminal at Idlewild, or what is now known as LaGuardia Airport in Queens, which represented a bold look at the future from what was surprisingly a truly classicist firm. The idea for this New York City municipal airport was created under the administration of Fiorello LaGuardia as part of a larger element of a works progress administration project during the Great Depression, which in total gave work to roughly 23,000 people to build this airport. The firm was chosen to provide a thoroughly modern design for the innovation of flying, which was then seen as rare, glamorous, and adventurous. As Chester Aldrich was away in Rome at the time, William Delano had full command, and Delano's vision called for a stripped-back plan that was still immersed in their earlier classical training. The sparing ornament still contained the lightheartedness that Delano was known for, but was used instead to express the building's function to all who visited. At first, it seemed this interior had a celestial mosaic in the waiting room, which was then replaced as the terminal was expanded. While aviation has evolved significantly, the Marine Air Terminal remains the gem of LaGuardia Airport, which ironically seems to in perpetual need of a facelift everywhere other than its original building. The circular waiting room was very forward-thinking and uncluttered, but still very regal without superfluous detail. The star of the show was a massive 230-foot mural by James Brooks, which depicted the history of aeronautical aspirations. Both the interior and exterior of the building were concurrently made New York City landmarks. The last major work that related to Delano and Aldrich was a set of alterations in 1948 to the White House in Washington to erect a balcony for the South Portico under President Harry Truman. As chairman of the Fine Arts Commission, Delano took this on as a favor to the president, who hated the awnings that were used for the balcony. While critics were harsh at the time, the addition has grown to be seen as a major improvement. For a firm that extolled the spirit of America in all its forms, there is no better honor than to have a permanent place in the People's House. Moving back to Great Neck, 260 Kings Point, which is located on the way to what was the Brickman estate at the point, was built in 1923 for Harold J. Roeg, who was an executive of the W.R. Grace Company and president of the Grace Pan Am Airways. Some of you may know it as Panagra while it was still active. The design Delano and Aldrich created was a recall at their earlier work in Mutton Town at Chelsea, which you saw earlier, with protruding dormer windows and a grand Norman French inspiration with turrets. Today it remains an unassuming but significant Kings Point estate in private hands, and one of the great estates of the Point area of Kings Point. As an unexpected twist to this find, the entry pillars for the Roeg estate note a name of Belhazen and a date of 1887, which may indicate either that a home here was demolished before Roeg arrived, or that one was there and it was rebuilt by the firm in a new design. As this is novel research into the fact that Roeg had an estate here and that Delano and Aldrich designed here, further research will be needed to understand this story fully. Although it is no longer standing, unfortunately, Delano and Aldrich also made alterations to a mansion for Louis Aldrich in 1933 in the village of Saddle Rock, not far from the main branch of the Great Neck Library. As unfortunately has been demolished, where the location it was is now the Saddle Rock Village Park. Inside the Morgan Park Comfort Station in Glen Cove are a series of mosaic artworks that were interpreted and made by elementary students of Glen Cove, highlighting local sites of interest. As beautiful as Delano and Aldrich's work is in real life, there's something remarkable about it being reimagined by the next generations who inherit these great works of design. In speaking to owners like the Alexanders, whose New Haven home we saw earlier, there was never any question in their mind to the value in investing in preservation. William Delano once remarked that architecture was the most difficult of all the arts. He noted that it must serve practical needs and at the same time create an emotion. And the architect's only tools for attaining it are such vague qualities as line, mass, proportion, and color. Judging by the everlasting value that continues to resonate a century later in the work that Delano and Aldrich designed, it is undeniable that their firms succeeded mightily at this task. Lastly, I want to give a nod to all the contributors and photographers who informed this project. We will leave time for any questions or thoughts on history, Delano and Aldrich, or other aspects of Great Neck that you'd like to share. Thank you all for listening. Carol, you're muted.
Carol, you're still muted.
Well, what I said before was, thank you. I'm sorry that we're not in person because we would all be applauding now. And it doesn't do so well on television. But I want to open this up now for questions and answers. So please do step up.
And if I may,
Yes.
there was no closed caption, and I couldn't find the app to open it. So I would ask that in the future, please be sure that the closed caption option is functioning.
I don't know. I'm really not a technical person, but I don't know if we have the capability to do closed captions. Can somebody answer that question?
If I recall, you had it available during the last presentation. So whomever sets it up, if you would ask them, it's an option that's available, if they would please turn it on.
We'll look into that more. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
I think there might be a way to set up closed captioning on each individual Zoom under settings.
Thanks, Tina. What we'll do is we will research what you could do as an individual for settings, and if there's something that we can do for the general presentation itself. We'll find out between now and the next time we have our new program.
Thank you.
If no one else is going to make it a general comment, I'd like to make a general comment. I've lived in Great Neck for many, many, many years. I'm familiar with practically all of the representative private sites that were discussed tonight, and I really appreciate the concentration on so many of these private sites. There are many other private sites, but obviously they were not made by the same architectural firm. But I was really quite impressed by the variety of designs and the variety of buildings, many of which I had passed by, but I had never realized, for example, that the post office building in Glen Cove dated back to the New Deal, and that the architectural firm had designed that. I'm very familiar with the Marine Air Terminal. I've written several articles about the Marine Air Terminal, and I do exhibits at the Cradle of Aviation Museum, and so I'm very, very familiar with it, its history. And in fact, we have an exhibit that traces the flying boats of that time that were using the Marine Air Terminal. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. we did have a presentation several years ago about the aviation history on Long Island, and had an excellent, I think it was the director was a speaker. And unfortunately, we were not able to record that presentation because it was fascinating. Maybe at some point in the future, we might be able to look into seeing that again so that we could have it in our archives, or maybe the museum, does the museum have something available, sir? I didn't see your name, the gentleman who just spoke.
Yes, my name is Mort, M-O-R-T, Hans, H-A-N-S, and I can ask the curator if you wish to contact you, or you can contact the curator. And I'm going to arrange, I'm sure he'd be delighted to make another presentation. If not him, then possibly I might.
Excellent. Yes, we're always looking. We are very fortunate to have so many wonderful speakers in our area. And there are just countless topics that we would love to explore, but you have to find a knowledgeable person who's able to do that. So I would really appreciate that.
I was very happy to learn about Chelsea Mansion because I've always loved that estate, and to learn about it tonight because I don't think they had the information about the architects on their website. So that was great.
Yes,
But-
unfortunately, it's a commonality that the works of many of these architects are unknown. The fact that there were designs by Delano Aldrich in Great Neck was not actually known by apparently anyone until
Wow.
this. So there's a lot to be done. And part of the series and the goal that the Great Neck Historical Society is doing is to unveil the stories and let people know that in their backyard are some of the most important architects in history, and they can either preserve them or run the risk of losing them. So this
Well-
is extremely important.
I commend you both. It was great. And just, I'm a publicist. So what I'm thinking about is that people who don't tune into the Historical Society are missing out on all of this. And maybe you could make some arrangements with the presentations that are in Great Neck. Like tonight, there's apparently a concert on Middle Neck Road where somebody could make a presentation once in a while about this sort of thing, so that Great Neckers are aware of, the history. A lot of people are new and have no idea.
Absolutely. That's great, Tina. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions on any aspect of Great Neck history? Happy to answer.
I think that we had a request. I asked you about this prior to the meeting tonight, but someone had written in asking what the current status was of the telephone building. Would you like to share that information?
Sure. So we discussed at the first presentation in the series about Ralph Walker, who designed the telephone building in Great Neck Plaza, not far from the Great Neck Post Office on Barstow Road, I believe. It was on, what was it originally called? A different road that actually escapes me. And it is a Great Neck Plaza historic landmark, meaning that any changes that are made to it have to be regulated by their Landmarks Commission to be authentic and respectful of the original design. As I understand it, I believe they were doing exterior work, largely probably to repoint and repair the brick on the exterior. But because it is a landmark, there is an extraordinary assurance that whatever is being done in a very high degree and is being done with the sympathy that it will make the design shine through moving forward. It is not being demolished. It is just being probably most likely repaired.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? Well, thank you all for taking time out of your evening to join us. I know many of you are on our mailing list and receive this information. Please talk with your friends and neighbors about the Historical Society that we are trying to inform and educate the public about the treasures that exist here in Great Neck and throughout Long Island. We appreciate any kind of input that you have to make. We always like hearing from you. And I wish you a wonderful evening. And thanks so much, Andrew, for everything that you have done for us. Jay, Jay is our president. Jay, do you want to just have a word here?
Yeah, I just want to thank Andrew and of course Carol for setting this up. And we do enjoy both the Zoom meetings as well as in person at the Great Neck House, which had been closed for a while. It's fixed up now and a nice venue. And please join us, look us up on the internet. Very reasonable membership, and we'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you again, Rachel.
Nice.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank-
you.
Yeah.